As you can see behind me today, we're doing another stunt with balloons. This time it's on the issue of climate change. We're trying to highlight the fact that the G8 countries are the highest emitters of carbon per head of population. We've got George Bush and Stephen Harper from Canada floating in the air to show that they're the main culprits. We're asking the G8 to cut their emissions immediately. Oxfam's also asking for the G8 countries to give extra funding to help poor countries adapt to the effects of climate change. We think it's grossly unfair that poor countries are hit first and the worst by climate change, despite the fact that they're the least responsible for it. We've just heard the G8's decision on the issue of climate change. I'm now joined by Antonio Hill, Oxfam's climate change expert. So Antonio, what did they decide and what do we think?
The G8's decision was to work towards a global agreement to reduce emissions by 50% by 2050. For Oxfam, that's too little too late. We need to hear what the G8 itself is going to do to reduce emissions and avoid dangerous climate change as soon as possible. Another part of the decision was about financing to help poor people cope with the impacts of climate change. The money they provided was too little, but most importantly, every dollar they spend on the new fund is going to be a dollar less for health and education that's needed to achieve the Millennium Development Goals, and that's unacceptable.
Yesterday we talked about the need to reduce the production of biofuels. Today we're talking about the issue of climate change. How do they fit together for Oxfam?
Well, biofuels can play a small part to help tackle the climate change issue. The problem is that if you're looking for the most expensive way to actually reduce emissions, biofuels is it. In addition, biofuels is the #1 contributor to the recent rise in prices for food that's affecting millions of poor people around the world, and that's a major problem that we have to tackle.
Okay, and finally, where next for Oxfam's campaigning on climate change?
We're looking ahead to the conference in Poland in December, which is the next stop in the UN climate negotiations. And we're also campaigning for countries to take the money that they're using to support the current generation of biofuels and put it to second generation that avoids the problems that I just talked about. And also push for public transport to reduce emissions from transport overall, and greater fuel efficiency standards for cars.
Okay, thanks Antonio. Tune in again tomorrow to hear Oxfam's final verdict on the whole of the G8.